What's going on, everyone? Scott here. Welcome back to the channel. So Survivor Season 49, Episode 3 is here. It was a very emotional episode as well. Last week, the Blue Tribe losing streak continued. Andy ended up going home for the Blue Tribe last week. Will things get any better this week in Episode 3? Well, let's find out. But before we do jump in, if you could just hit that like and subscribe button down there. We'll have more Survivor content on the channel throughout the season, so just make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. So jumping right into the episode, the next morning after Tribal Council, back at the Blue Tribe, Alex drops the episode name, Lovable Losers, describing the Blue Tribe. Jake and Alex are just talking about the importance of winning, and, they're down to their core four, which was kind of an alliance that they had formed, earlier on in the game. They have no supplies, so they just have to win. Something has to turn around. Sophie and Jeremiah talk about if they have to turn on each other, it possibly being Alex, but obviously he has an idol, so that would obviously be tricky. Over at the Yellow Tribe, vibes are fairly high. They have comfort, they have food, they've been able to get to know everyone fairly well. Jason brings up the idea of them finding the Beware advantage as a group, so they have something to use going forward into the next stage of the game. MC brings in Steven, talks to Steven, who they've had a close relationship with to this point, and they're like, let's trying to figure out how to divide up to make sure one of them gets it to use going forward for them, not like this whole tribe kumbaya thing, essentially. And MC does find the Beware advantage and shows Steven to build that trust, same as before the other ones, that you have to wait till you lose a challenge to get instructions for where to go to get your vote back and get the idol associated with the Beware advantage. Over at the Red Tribe, good vibes as well. There's a core four of Nate, Savannah, Shannon, and Rizzo. Sage and Jawan talk about what's really going on, with this kumbaya stuff, and is it me? Are there conversations going on behind their backs? Sage opens up about, friends in the past, essentially, ghosting her in the past, being friends and then ghosting her, and she takes the risk and throws out Savannah's name to Shannon. Unfortunately, Savannah is Shannon's number one, and she fills her in on it, so just something to watch out for going forward. But back at the Blue Tribe, Jake is reflecting on his wife, literally about to be giving birth any minute. But the only reason he's out here is the chance to win $1 million that would give his son and his family the life that they deserve. However, we saw this in the preview. A snake came up and latched onto Jake's leg. He seemed not that, I don't want to say he seemed fine, but he, was able to walk over and tell everyone, hey, this snake just came up and, latched on my leg. He does eventually sit down. There was two little marks on the bottom of his foot. I believe it was the bottom or the side of his foot. So he did get bit. The producer, comes in. We see the producer come in, see them take a look at his foot. They say, just stay right here. We're going to send a picture back to base camp. And then we actually find out, there was a lot of, this next little bit is kind of all, it's very scary, first of all, but then also it's you see a lot of behind the scenes stuff of Survivor and how careful and, how much care they put into everyone that's on that island, but, and all the safety precautions and measures that they really do take out there. But they have a safety book back at camp. Alex goes back to see if the snake was on there. It is on there, and he sees that it is venomous, but he's trying to keep it cool for Jake. If it is venomous, he doesn't want to give off any more to make Jake more nervous, and obviously, all the emotions and everything that's going on, right now in this situation. He heads off on the boat with the medical team to go back to base camp, to the main medical sent hospital, I think essentially they called it there, and we get footage from the base camp. He gets off the boat, essentially, they have him lay down, give oxygen to him, carry him in, and they just immediately start going to work. And anytime, seeing this, anytime there's been any medical emergency on Survivor, and just in general, seeing healthcare professionals and doctors, nurses, anything, when they're over someone doing all this stuff, and you're, going in here, oxygen here, tube here, they're checking everything. It's obviously scary to watch what's going on, but you just had to give incredible credit to all of them and what they're able to do, and making sure Jake was okay in this situation. And essentially, the doctor says that they think it's a dry bite. So essentially, no venom, but they still want to take all the precautions. And we see kind of all the behind the scenes stuff, just says, this is obviously something we haven't really done before, but we wanted to show you kind of into all the precautions and everything that, they were taking for Jake to make sure he's okay. He's able to sit up, and he says he's feeling a little bit better. whatever. But I think he was saying his foot was still a little sore. So, then obviously the question that comes with all this is, will they let Jake go back in the game? The doctor says he would not feel comfortable sending Jake back into the game with all the uncertainty because, like Jeff's kind of said, after he was a little bit better and able to sit up and everything and have the conversation with the doctor in there as well. It's like, if it wasn't Survivor, you'd be wanting to give him fluids, nourishments, and everything, and then in an air conditioner and everything. But obviously, because he was still technically in the game of Survivor, they weren't able to do any of that, or they didn't want to do any of that until it was official. But he's like, we can't send you back out there into the unknown environment of Survivor, and like Jeff says, unforgiving environment of Survivor, out there like they are, and that just goes to show how real this really is. Like, I think that's what Jeff said on there, or someone else said. It might have been one of the cast members, but this isn't fake. They're not staying in a resort. They're not staying in whatever. It is real out there, and this just goes to show that. Very emotional moment. Jake gives Jeff a message to give to Sophie, Alex, and Jeremiah. Basically, want you to be the final three. Sorry I couldn't be there to help get you there. But everyone shows up at the challenge. They obviously see that Annie went home, but they see that Jake's not there. Now, the Blue Tribe doesn't know any update on Jake yet either at this point. So we're going in. They have three players. The other tribes still do have their 6 players as well. So are they going to run the challenge, or are we just going to update everyone on Jake? What's going on? But so Jeff informs everyone, the other 2 tribes, of what happened with Jake, and then to everyone that the doctors unfortunately could not clear Jake to come back into the game with all the uncertainties and everything. Obviously emotional for everyone, not just the Blue Tribe, who, Sophie, Alex, and Jeremiah, who have got to know him over these first couple days of the game, handful of days of the game, but, for everyone, because it's, this is a real thing. Like went back, and Jeff even said, wants to assure everyone that they have a lot of local Fijians that are on the crew, and that they work close with, and they said they've never known this to happen to anyone. And Jeff kind of alludes it to, is it possible? It's possible to get struck by lightning. Yes, it's possible, but we're going to be in these waters. The crews are going to be in the waters, and everyone should feel safe. Obviously this is something that we haven't really seen before. We've seen medical emergencies on Survivor, but nothing really like this. And obviously grateful that it wasn't venomous in the end, because obviously that, could have been worse. Obviously still, you absolutely feel for Jake that, his dreams getting taken away of playing Survivor while he was out here as well, leaving his wife pregnant as well. We'll get to more of that here in a second here with Jake, but obviously everyone feels bad. So kind of talking about are we going to run this challenge? And they're going to run the challenge, and the Blue Tribe says they're going to run it dedicated to Jake, because that's what he would want them to do, and that's what he would do to give it their all in the challenge. The first tribe to finish wins a tarp, hammock, all the comfort stuff. Second tribe to finish wins the tarp as well. Rizzo, Jawan, and Shannon sitting out for the red tribe. Sophie, Matt, and MC for the yellow tribe. We get to the challenge, and Jason on the yellow tribe has been incredible all season, should I say, on the puzzle. They finish first, red in second. So blue is going to tribal council with just 3 people, just brutal. Not sure this has ever happened, before. Obviously, besides a final 3 tribal council. I know we've had, there was some seasons of Survivor early on where tribes got very, very small like this. I'm not sure ever kind of in this situation, though. I don't think has ever happened. Completely silence afterwards that Jeff, talks about, all with empathy for the Blue Tribe. Everything they've been through, they haven't really won it. They haven't won anything. They haven't had their fire. They don't have any food, no rewards, no nothing. They've been to every tribal council to this point. They're going again tonight. Just absolutely brutal. We head to commercial with an update on Jake. Thankfully, he's healthy, and, silver lining of everything, as they said, made it home for the birth of his son. So obviously wishing Jake and his family all the best. Hope we see him out there again. Obviously we don't know here. I know the names are probably out there, but the 2 names that we have from this season going on to Survivor 50, could he possibly be a name? I would love him to get a second chance out there. I thought, he was an incredible person out there. Thought he was funny. His shoe banditness. Would love to see if he does get back out there, if he can, redo that or come up with a different way to without people knowing. Really, I guess if it's 50, they won't have seen 49 yet, but I don't know how quick that is, especially with the newborn. So if we don't see him out there 50, would love to see him back, in another returnee season as well. But glad that Jake is doing healthy. Glad that his son's here, and hope his wife and his family are doing well. Obviously, had a touching story, a sad story about his dad as well that he was able to tell earlier this season as well. So hope Jake and all of his family is doing good. Very emotional exit here. Unfortunately, always is when it's in a medical emergency. But back at camp for the Blue Tribe, they're all just still trying to wrap their heads on everything that happened today. They talk about, how they're going to go about conversations, and they all just agree to just talk to each other individually. Alex's idol is obviously the question is, does he want to play it or does he want to try to save it? Jeremiah is fine with voting Alex because he's closest with Sophie, but they're trying to figure out how to trick Alex into not playing his idol. Over at the Red Tribe, they acknowledge that it's probably going to be red versus yellow. Obviously, with the Blue Tribe now being down to 2, obviously we're assuming a switch next episode. You can't run challenges 2v2v2. You're going to have 4 people sitting out from the challenges. So there's going to be a switch upcoming next episode. We obviously know that. But they know it's going to be red versus yellow, so they talk about doing a group idol hunt to find that beware advantage so they have some ammunition to use in the impending war. And Rizzo finds the beware advantage and tells everyone, this is for everyone, whatever. But he's like, selfishly, this thing is for me. Same as the others, you have to wait till you lose an immunity challenge. So curious how that works. Say they do a swap and maybe Rizzo ends up on another beach. How that works out. Curious there how that will work out if something will change possibly. But we'll see. Cross that bridge when we get there. Back at the Blue Tribe, Sophie is telling Alex that her and Jeremiah don't have an alliance. She's trying to convince him to save his idol for the merge, but he's like, if I didn't play this idol and went home, I would slap myself. Jeremiah is trying to use his astrological sign knowledge and what Alex's astrological sign is on cues onto how to approach to talk to Alex to try to convince him to do what he wants in this tribal council and, talk to him here. Sophie spies on their conversation and seems like Alex will be voting for her is the read that she got. And so she throws the idea of writing Jeremiah's name down and talks about how loyal she is to Alex back at the shelter as well. But we move ahead to tribal council, and Jeff said they seemed rudderless today. And Alex explains this, Jake is the one that had the relationships with all of us. And with everything that happened today, they kind of had to just snap into the game and think about like end game alliances or who you want to move forward into the next stage of the game with. And Jeremiah says they kind of had to, same thing, kind of they had to draw a line in the sand and, bamboozle one of their own as they were part of this, 4-person alliance with Jake. Sophie is like, it's kind of like a salsa dance, 2v1, whatever. She's like, I do salsa, so I enjoy it. Alex says that this was like an application process and there was like interviews of, who to move forward with. And since he has the idol that everyone knew about, essentially it was like, who is moving forward with him? Jeff sends us into the vote with, your boat has sank. They've talked about their boat kind of starting to sink a couple episodes ago, tribal councils ago, and says, your boat has sank. Good news is there's a lifeboat, but only room for 2 people on that lifeboat. The other one will have to walk the plank. We get to the vote, and Alex plays as either idol, rather be safe than sorry. But there is 1 vote for Alex and 2 votes for Jeremiah. Jeremiah's going home. I feel like Sophie kind of felt like where the stuff was going, that Alex wasn't going to let that thing sit into his pocket and possibly go home. She didn't want any, backfire and the votes be on her and her go home. She talked about that a couple times throughout the day as well. And just didn't want to get caught on the wrong side of things. Alex afterwards is like, I shouldn't have played it. But in that situation, you have to. You can't go home with something in your pocket that's got to be the worst feeling in Survivor, going home with something in your pocket. So Jeremiah's going home. He was a fun-loving player. Incredible sense of humor. Kind of scary laugh, though. But with him and Jake both going home this episode, Blue is down to 2 tribe members going into episode 4. So next week, drop your buffs. And it seems like the game faces are on and ready for a war to start. So that'll do it for this episode. Obviously, an emotional episode with Jake medically having to be removed from the season, go home from the season, and then Jeremiah, who I really liked. I think a lot of people like Jeremiah as well. going home for the Blue Tribe, and just a absolutely brutal first 3 episodes for the Blue Tribe. But hopefully for Sophie, for Alex, their fortunes can maybe start to change with the tribe swaps. Maybe there's some cracks. Obviously, none of the other tribes have gone to tribal council yet, so you don't really know where those lines in the sand are for those. So you hope that, either of them can kind of find a crack and, make it along further and start to get their footing kind of in this game and the next portion. But anyway, that'll do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.